Can you imagine a teacher, someone meant to protect and guide you, deliberately weaponizing your disability? My English teacher didn't just mock my Tourette's. She meticulously plotted to trigger my tics, gaslit my family, and turned my entire school against me. But what she didn't know was that I was planning to take her down. And I ruined her career in the most devastating way possible. Okay, so I was in 9th grade when Miss Taylor first dropped that bomb. You'll never amount to anything. Yeah, my English teacher said that to me. She just loved using my Tourette's as her personal tool to make me feel like a complete outsider. I'd been diagnosed at 10, and for years, I'd poured my heart and soul into hiding it. I just wanted to be a normal kid, have normal friends. And honestly, I was pretty good at it. But high school changed everything. My mom, bless her heart, insisted I tell all my teachers, just in case there was an emergency. And that, my friends, is where this nightmare truly began. Most teachers were cool about it. No big deal. But when I told Miss Taylor, she actually burst out laughing. Laughed in my face. Then with this smug look she said, "Want my advice, kid? You should focus less on following trends and more on studying." I just stared, my mind reeling. She kept going, her voice dripping with venom. "Welcome to the real world. Not everyone's going to give an F about your quirks." My face felt like it was on fire. I just nodded, desperate for her to stop talking, to just stop. I went home that day, absolutely shattered, crying my eyes out into my mom's shoulder. She held me tight, furious, and promised to go straight to the school administration to get her fired. The next morning we sat in front of the principal. He was this old guy with a white beard and these beady little eyes. We told him everything. And when we finished, he slammed his fist on the desk. "You really expect me to get mad over this?" he bellowed, then actually laughed like a pig. "Get the F out of my office. You need to learn to grow a pair." We were speechless. If my mom could have afforded a lawyer, we would have sued him into oblivion. But we couldn't. So I lied. I went home and told my mom that Miss Taylor had a change of heart. And my mom, poor thing, pretended to believe me. It was easier that way. The truth? English became my absolute least favorite class. Every single day, Miss Taylor found a new way to scrutinize me. My shoulder would twitch during a test, and she'd just stare, then sneer. "Stop embarrassing yourself." If I made a clicking sound while she was teaching, she'd stop the entire lesson, bury her face in her hands, and dramatically sigh for what felt like an eternity. And here's the thing about Tourette's. Unlike autism, tics are almost impossible to mask. The second that urge hits, like barking like a dog, it's this agonizing knot in my stomach, tightening like a rope around my neck. But because of Miss Taylor, I started suppressing harder than I ever had before. By the end of each day, my whole body ached from holding everything in. I'd collapse onto my desk, falling asleep, just desperate to prove how strong I was. I needed to prove her wrong. Then one day, everything went completely sideways. We were in the middle of a test, and I'd been fighting this tic for what felt like forever. It was a firecracker building in my chest, threatening to explode. My whole body was shaking, sweat dripping down my forehead, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of my desk, like it was the only thing keeping me from flying apart. Miss Taylor, of course, noticed. Immediately, she stood up, her heels clicking like a predator's claws on the tile floor. She marched over, bent down, leaned in so close I could smell her perfume, and whispered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything." That was it. I snapped. Before I even knew what was happening, the tic erupted. Loud. Uncontrollable. A sharp guttural sound, then woof, woof. Kids around me either burst into cruel laughter or stared, their eyes wide with second-hand embarrassment. But Miss Taylor? She didn't yell. She didn't say a word. She just went to her desk, pulled out a pair of headphones, and gestured for me to put them on. These were supposed to be my sensory headphones, the ones with calming music. Something felt off, but I was so desperate for the tics to stop I just grabbed them. The second they were on, I knew. I'd made a terrible, terrible mistake. It wasn't the steady rhythms I needed. It was chaos. Sudden, piercing shrieks, irregular beats. It felt like someone was scraping my bones with their nails. My body reacted instantly. Every single tic I'd been suppressing exploded out at once. My arms jerked violently, my head snapped back, and these terrifying, loud vocal tics I'd never even had before ripped out of my throat. I tried to pull the earbuds out, but my hands were thrashing too wildly to grab them. The whole class was silent, frozen in shock. Except for Miss Taylor. She was laughing, shrieking, telling everyone how good my performance was. The rest of the day? A blur. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in the hospital, nurses everywhere. Turns out, I'd bashed my skull against the wall so hard, I'd given myself a concussion. My mom was there, tears streaming down her face. She told me Miss Taylor had admitted to playing those sounds. Admitted? She designed them specifically to trigger my tics, to prove it was something I could get over. My blood boiled. Rage, pure and incandescent, consumed me. I knew right then I had to make Miss Taylor pay. My phone buzzed on the hospital bed. Maya, my best friend, had texted me repeatedly while I was out. I scrolled through her frantic messages, my hands shaking. The last one made my stomach drop. Check Facebook now. My mom had stepped out for coffee, giving me the privacy I needed. I opened Facebook, found Miss Taylor's profile. There it was. Posted just a couple of hours ago. Praying for my troubled students tonight. Sometimes those who need the most help resist it the hardest. Please keep JM in your thoughts as they recover from today's incident. Mental health matters. Jim. My initials. She'd used my actual initials. The comments. Parents praising her dedication. Other teachers calling her an inspiration. Even the PTA president gushing about how lucky we were to have such a caring educator. I took a screenshot before my hands could shake too badly. Then I found her Instagram. My finger hovered over the message button. Asterisk, this is stupid. Wait for mom. Asterisk, but the rage burned too hot. I typed quickly. We both know what you did. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. For what felt like an eternity. Finally, her response. I'm concerned about your emotional state right now. This kind of paranoid thinking is exactly why I tried to help you overcome your condition. Perhaps you should focus on healing instead of making wild accusations. My head throbbed where I'd hit the wall. A nurse came in to check my vitals and I quickly locked my phone. She adjusted my and the room started to feel fuzzy. Mom came back just as the sedatives kicked in. I was agitated, my hands clenched around my phone. I tried to explain about the Facebook post, the messages, but my words came out slurred, confused. Mom's face creased with worry. She called the nurse, who increased the medication. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was a new text notification from Miss Taylor. Your mom thinks you're having an episode. Perfect. I woke up to Maya's face, inches from mine. The room was dark, only the glow of the heart monitor. She pressed a finger to her lips. It was almost midnight. Visiting hours had ended hours ago. Maya, being Maya, had snuck in through the emergency exit. She looked utterly exhausted, her usually perfect makeup smeared. She showed me her phone screen, keeping the brightness low. Screenshots from the teacher's group chat that her mom, a substitute, had access to. Miss Taylor was telling everyone I'd had a psychotic break, that I'd attacked myself for attention, and she was just trying to help me with approved therapeutic techniques. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I couldn't risk alerting the nurses. Maya just held my hand as I scrolled through the messages. Teacher after teacher, showering Miss Taylor with sympathy for having to deal with such a difficult student. The principal backing her version of events. Even teachers who'd always been kind to me, they were buying into it. My phone battery was at 3%. I had a choice to make. Show mom these messages now and risk her thinking I was truly having a mental health crisis, or wait until I was discharged when my head was clear. The sedatives made everything feel like I was underwater, foggy and unreal. I chose to wait. Maya stayed until a security guard's flashlight swept past the door. She squeezed my hand, a silent promise, before slipping back out. I lay there in the dark, watching my phone battery slowly die, while Miss Taylor commented on my mom's Facebook post about the accident. Thinking of you during this difficult time. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Your child is lucky to have such a devoted mother. The audacity. A couple of days later, Maya sent me a Snapchat video. She'd been watching the parking lot after school. It showed Miss Taylor walking to her car with a black garbage bag, placing it carefully in her trunk, looking around suspiciously, then driving off. The timestamp showed it was right after dismissal. I immediately texted Maya, begging her to follow Miss Taylor. My desperation made me careless. I didn't think about how suspicious it would look. A student filming a teacher in the parking lot. Maya tried to be subtle, but Miss Taylor noticed. The last frame of Maya's video? Miss Taylor looking directly at the camera. A chilling smile on her face. Miss Taylor started visiting me in the hospital. She came during Mom's work hours, always with gifts. Flowers, balloons, a card signed by the entire English department. She'd sit there talking to my mom about lesson plans, offering to help me catch up. My mom, totally taken in, ate it up. Asterisk, here's a teacher who cares. Who wants to make sure I don't fall behind. Asterisk, I watched from my bed, unable to speak up without sounding completely paranoid. The sedatives they kept giving me for agitation made coherent arguments impossible. Miss Taylor would pat my hand, tell Mom how much potential I had, if only I could learn to manage my condition better. My mom actually started saying how supportive Miss Taylor was, how lucky we were, how maybe I had misunderstood her intentions. The manipulation was so smooth, so utterly calculated. I realized this wasn't just about punishing me anymore. This was about controlling the entire narrative, twisting it until I was the problem. The breakthrough came when I was reviewing my hospital paperwork. On the EMT intake form there was a section for witness statements. And there, in messy handwriting, was a note. Teacher on scene stated she gave student AP to prove they could overcome tics. Student was found with head trauma. Severe tic attack in progress. Teacher seemed proud of technique. And the EMT's name, Rodriguez J. I quickly took a photo with Maya's phone. Mine was still dead. This was it. The first piece of real, undeniable evidence that contradicted Miss Taylor's story. But I knew I needed more. Mom's church friend, Janet, visited that afternoon. She sat on the edge of my bed while Mom was in the bathroom, lowering her voice. I've heard some concerning things about Miss Taylor at the last school board meeting, she said, her eyes serious. She seems very intense about certain students. My daughter had her last year and transferred out after 2 weeks. Janet was on the school board. This was the first crack in Miss Taylor's perfect image. I wanted to tell Janet everything, but Mom returned. Still, Janet's eyes met mine with a knowing look. She understood something was deeply wrong. Then my dad called that evening. He and Mom had been divorced for a few years, and he lived 2 states away. His voice was cold, distant. Miss Taylor had reached out to him, expressing concern about my self-harm and attention-seeking behavior. She'd even suggested he consider having me live with him, somewhere with better mental health resources. Dad, who hadn't visited me in months, was suddenly an expert on what was best for me. The conversation was short. He made it clear he believed the school's version. Another adult, another person Miss Taylor had turned against me. I hung up, feeling more isolated than ever. That night I went through old emails on Mom's laptop. Buried in my drafts was a message I'd started writing to the school counselor months ago. I'd never sent it, too scared of the consequences. But there it was, dated and timestamped, detailing Miss Taylor's behavior. How she mocked my tics, how she made me feel worthless. What made my blood run cold was the forwarding information at the bottom. The counselor had forwarded my draft to Miss Taylor. I'd never even sent it, but somehow it had been accessed and shared. The violation of privacy was staggering. Miss Taylor even volunteered to bring my schoolwork home. She'd always arrive when Mom was there, helpful, concerned. But I started noticing her eyes. They'd scan our apartment. She'd ask these seemingly innocent questions about our routine, our support system, our finances. She was studying us. Like specimens. A few days later, my manager from the grocery store where I worked part-time called Mom. They'd received an anonymous complaint about an unstable employee who was a danger to customers. The handwriting? It perfectly matched Miss Taylor's distinctive loops and curves. I lost my job while still recovering in the hospital. Then my family doctor, who I'd seen for years, suddenly became dismissive. When Mom brought up my anxiety about returning to school, Dr. Harrison barely looked up from his golf magazine. Typical teenage stress, he said, already filling out a prescription pad before he'd even examined me. I later learned he and the principal played golf together every weekend. Desperate for answers, I created a fake Instagram account to monitor Miss Taylor's daughter, Brittany. Brittany was a senior at a different high school. Her posts were typical teenage stuff, but her stories, they told a different tale. Complaints about her mom's obsession with certain students. Eye-rolling emojis about another dinner conversation dominated by her mom's problem kids. Then I found it. A video from a week before my incident. Brittany was recording her cat when her mom's voice carried from the other room. These trigger sounds really work, Miss Taylor was saying to someone, probably her husband. You should see how they react. It's like pressing buttons. The video was dated exactly 1 week before she'd used those headphones on me. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She'd been planning it. 2 classmates reached out privately through Instagram. Sarah from my history class, Marcus from gym. Both had stories about Miss Taylor's special attention. Sarah had ADHD, and Miss Taylor would deliberately create distracting environments during tests. Marcus had anxiety, and Miss Taylor would call on him repeatedly when she knew he was having a panic attack. One of them mentioned trying to record her once but getting caught. The pattern was crystal clear. Miss Taylor targeted students with invisible disabilities, things that couldn't be seen but could be triggered. She positioned herself as trying to help us overcome our conditions, while actually causing profound harm. It was systematic, calculated. Then Connor, Miss Taylor's teaching assistant, quit suddenly. He reached out to me through Facebook with a simple message. I couldn't watch anymore. When I convinced him to meet me at Starbucks after I was discharged, he looked absolutely haunted. He showed me his resignation letter, citing ethical concerns, and described what he'd witnessed. Miss Taylor's cruel methods, her conversations about students, her perverse joy when she successfully triggered someone. But Connor was scared. He needed a recommendation letter for graduate school. He couldn't afford to make an enemy of Miss Taylor. Still, he gave me what he could, confirmation. Confirmation that I wasn't alone. That I wasn't crazy. The retaliation came swiftly. Connor's girlfriend, Catherine, also a teacher, let slip in the teacher's lounge that Connor had met with me. By the next day, his promised recommendation letter was suddenly unavailable. Miss Taylor made sure everyone knew Connor was unreliable and prone to exaggeration. A week later, Catherine found me after school, looking around nervously before speaking. Several of us know something's wrong with Taylor, she whispered. But the principal protects her. She gets results. Her students' test scores are high because she terrorizes anyone who might bring down the average. We're all too scared to speak up. The web was bigger than just Miss Taylor. It was an entire system designed to protect her while sacrificing students like me. But now I had allies, witnesses, evidence. As I prepared for discharge, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Miss Taylor had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. She thought my Tourette's made me weak. She was wrong. The discharge papers felt like a lead weight in my hands as Mom drove me home. And get this. Miss Taylor had signed up to co-lead my mom's divorce support group that very week. I only found out when Mom mentioned how thoughtful it was for a teacher to volunteer her time helping struggling parents. My stomach churned. Mom described Miss Taylor's presentation about enabling behaviors in parents of troubled teens. She used hypothetical examples that matched my medical details exactly. I recognized the gaslighting tactics immediately. My therapist had taught me about psychological abuse patterns during our sessions about dealing with the divorce. Miss Taylor was systematically turning my mom's support network against us. I started documenting everything. A hidden Google Doc, backed up to 3 different cloud services, and a USB drive I kept hidden in my sock drawer. Miss Taylor had casually mentioned during one hospital visit how dangerous false accusations could be for students' futures. The threat was clear. Then Mr. Rodriguez, the school janitor, approached me on my first day back. He glanced around nervously, then told me he'd seen Miss Taylor testing different sound frequencies in an empty classroom weeks before my incident. She'd told him it was for a science fair project. His weathered face showed genuine concern as he described the strange equipment and how she'd been taking notes. This wasn't an accident. This was premeditated. Mom's best friend Helen became our first real ally. Her son had ADHD, and she recognized the pattern immediately when I shared my documented evidence. Helen's expression hardened as she read through the screenshots and timeline. She started pushing back against Miss Taylor's narrative in the support group, questioning the convenient timing of her involvement. The school resource officer listened to my story with a blank expression. Without criminal intent, he explained. It's just bad teaching methods. The system, he said, wasn't designed to handle this kind of psychological manipulation. I left his office understanding. Traditional channels wouldn't help. Maya, ever the tech wizard, created a Discord server. Within days, 3 former students had joined. They all had similar stories, similar injuries, similar gaslighting. One had a concussion from hitting her head during a triggered anxiety attack. Another had been hospitalized for exhaustion after Miss Taylor's encouragement to overcome his ADHD led to dangerous sleep deprivation. The third had transferred schools but still had nightmares. My aunt, a nurse at a different hospital, reviewed my medical records. She noticed a specific pattern of injury, perfectly consistent with neurologically triggered episodes. The medical evidence was mounting, but we needed more than just patterns. We needed proof of intent. Miss Taylor's former colleague from her previous school reached out through LinkedIn. She'd left after a similar incident, but the family had moved away before anything could be proven. The colleague couldn't say much, bound by professional courtesy, but her careful words painted a clear picture. This wasn't Miss Taylor's first time. I responded to every provocation from Miss Taylor with polite, documented emails, which I CC'd to the counselor. Miss Taylor was getting sloppy. Her frustration was showing. She'd expected me to crumble, not to meticulously build a case. Her emails became increasingly aggressive, barely maintaining professional language. Mom's insurance company set a deadline for claim resolution. We had 2 weeks to provide additional documentation or accept their initial assessment. The clock was ticking. Involving police still wasn't an option without clearer evidence of criminal intent. Then Connor's girlfriend, Catherine, overheard Miss Taylor in the teacher's lounge, discussing students who were fakers who need to be broken of their habits. Catherine recorded the conversation on her phone. The language. It matched exactly with Miss Taylor's master's thesis, which I'd found in the university library database. Her thesis on behavioral extinction in adolescent neurological disorders read like a terrifying handbook for what she'd done to me. Miss Taylor's daughter, Brittany, even posted a TikTok showing her mom crying in the car after a fight. The caption mentioned finding weird sound files on the family computer. The video disappeared within hours, but Maya had screen recorded it. The cracks in Miss Taylor's perfect facade were really showing now. When Miss Taylor actually offered me private tutoring sessions to help catch up, I declined publicly in the cafeteria, where dozens of students could witness. Her face flushed red as I politely explained that I'd arranged alternative support. Other English teachers had started requesting my friends transfer into their classes. The whispers were spreading. Miss Taylor's influence, I realized, was limited to the principal, 2 school board members, and a handful of parent allies who believed in her tough love approach. The rest were simply afraid or unaware. This knowledge shifted the power dynamic. Through Miss Taylor's former colleague, I connected with the previous victim's family. During our video call, their son demonstrated the exact same tic patterns triggered by identical sound frequencies. His mother broke down crying as she described their decision to homeschool after the school refused to take action. They had documented everything, but felt powerless against the system. Maya risked suspension by wearing a Justice for Tourette's shirt to school. Within days, it had become a movement. Students with various disabilities started sharing their own experiences with Miss Taylor. The administration threatened disciplinary action, but Maya's mom, a member of the local disability advocacy group, pushed back with legal precedents about free speech. Our late-night strategy sessions deepened my friendship with Maya. She'd stay up researching legal cases while I compiled evidence. Her unwavering support kept me grounded when the weight of fighting back felt utterly overwhelming. We even developed a system of hand signals to warn vulnerable students when Miss Taylor was in particularly predatory moods. Despite my rage, I refused to use Miss Taylor's daughter against her. When Brittany reached out apologetically through Instagram, I simply thanked her for her courage. I didn't press for more information. Maintaining the moral high ground mattered more than easy victories. The confrontation at the grocery store where I'd gotten my job back happened on a busy Saturday. Miss Taylor followed me through the aisles, loudly claiming I was harassing her by existing in public spaces. I retreated to the stockroom, but she pursued, her voice growing shrill. My manager intervened, and the security footage clearly showed Miss Taylor as the aggressor. Several customers provided witness statements. Multiple witnesses started corroborating my timeline through personal photos and social media posts. A classmate's Instagram story from the day of my injury showed Miss Taylor carrying the headphones to class. Another student's Snapchat caught her laughing in the hallway afterward. The digital breadcrumbs formed a clear, undeniable trail. Miss Taylor's teacher allies started eating lunch elsewhere. The dynamics shifted visibly as more stories emerged. Parents at school pickup exchanged worried whispers. The PTA president's expression changed from supportive to deeply concerned when 3 different families approached her with similar stories about their children. Maya's mom shared my story at the disability advocacy group meeting. Within days, they'd offered full support and resources, connecting me with families who'd faced similar situations and lawyers who specialized in educational abuse cases. The network of support grew stronger than Miss Taylor's web of manipulation. In the library study room, Miss Taylor cornered me behind the glass walls. She leaned in close, her finger jabbing toward my chest, hissing threats about ruining my future. I remained seated, hands folded calmly on the table. The librarian watched through the glass, as did 2 students studying nearby. My calm response contrasted sharply with her visible agitation. The witnesses exchanged knowing looks. Word spread quickly. Miss Taylor's mask was slipping in public. Now, the union representative suggested she take some personal time after multiple complaints reached their desk. She refused, insisting she'd done nothing wrong. The previous victim's mother revealed the final piece of the pattern. Miss Taylor had used identical methods on her son years ago. Same sound frequencies, same gaslighting, same devastating results. They even had recordings of Miss Taylor discussing her innovative teaching methods with other staff. The evidence was overwhelming. I created a warning network for vulnerable students. We developed subtle hand signals and code words. If Miss Taylor showed interest in a student with invisible disabilities, they'd be warned. The lunch ladies, bus drivers, and other support staff joined our informal network. They'd seen too much to stay silent any longer. Miss Taylor's attempts to manipulate my doctors failed when a medical assistant recognized her tactics. She tried the same thing with the previous victim. The medical office immediately implemented new policies about verifying identity and relationships before sharing any information. Janet witnessed Miss Taylor berating a custodian for enabling me by allowing me to use the bathroom during class without a hall pass. Janet's daughter had an anxiety disorder, and watching Miss Taylor's cruelty towards support staff finally crystallized her concerns. She began documenting school board discussions about Miss Taylor's methods. My reputation shifted among classmates. No longer the troubled kid, I became known as someone standing up to abuse. Students I'd never spoken to before offered quiet support in the hallways. Some shared their own stories of Miss Taylor's psychological games. The EMT who'd written the intake notes agreed to provide a sworn statement. Rodriguez's testimony about Miss Taylor's exact words during the ambulance arrival would be crucial. He'd been disturbed by her pride in triggering a medical emergency, and had documented it carefully. Mom faced a monumental decision as the insurance deadline approached. Pursuing a full investigation meant reliving the trauma and potentially years of legal battles. But accepting the current assessment meant letting Miss Taylor continue hurting students. The weight of that choice showed in Mom's sleepless nights. During a parent-teacher conference, Miss Taylor's true nature erupted when parents questioned her methods. She ranted about ungrateful students and enabling parents. Her professional mask completely shattered. Several parents recorded the outburst on their phones. The stakes crystallized clearly. This wasn't just about justice for me anymore. It was about protecting future victims. But pursuing this fight might mean sacrificing my own mental health and recovery. The choice felt impossible. I handled Miss Taylor's increasingly desperate provocations with documented grace. Every single interaction was recorded or witnessed. My classmates noticed the change in me. From victim to someone reclaiming power through careful strategic moves. Miss Taylor's frustration grew with each failed attempt to trigger me. Key parents began withdrawing support from Miss Taylor after comparing notes. 3 families discovered their children had similar experiences with triggered medical episodes. The pattern was undeniable to anyone willing to see it. Individual testimonies aligned to create an undeniable pattern. The truth was prevailing despite the system's fierce resistance. Even those who'd initially supported Miss Taylor couldn't ignore the mounting evidence. Her carefully constructed reputation crumbled, piece by agonizing piece. Multiple parents formally requested Miss Taylor be removed from teaching their children. The principal reluctantly agreed to modify duties, but she remained at school daily. This half measure satisfied no one and only increased tensions. Then Miss Taylor filed a complaint against me for harassment, using screenshots of my documentation efforts. The complaint backfired spectacularly when my lawyer demonstrated that every single contact had been initiated by Miss Taylor. Her own evidence proved my case. The administration restricted Miss Taylor's teaching privileges to non-vulnerable populations, assigning her only to AP seniors. But her presence in the building still terrorized vulnerable students. The survivor support network solidified, creating lasting bonds between those she targeted. Unexpected champions emerged from the staff. The football coach shared how Miss Taylor had tried to convince him I was faking my tics for attention. The drama teacher described Miss Taylor's attempts to prevent me from participating in activities. Even the strict math teacher defended me, sharing observations of Miss Taylor's predatory behavior. I presented the full documentation to Mom, who finally understood the scope of Miss Taylor's campaign. Her hands shook as she read through everything. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and heartbreaking. Mom's guilt over not protecting me earlier transformed into fierce, unwavering determination. When Mom confronted the principal with the evidence, his defensive reaction revealed his own deep complicity. He'd known about Miss Taylor's methods and chosen to protect her because her students' test scores were high. The corruption went deeper than just one teacher. The full truth emerged through a coordinated presentation of evidence. Connor provided his written testimony, detailing Miss Taylor's systematic targeting methods. The previous victim's family shared their recordings of Miss Taylor, discussing her behavioral extinction techniques with colleagues. Multiple witnesses submitted sworn statements about her pattern of triggering students' disabilities. The documentation painted an undeniable picture of calculated abuse, spanning years. The local disability advocacy group included my case in their monthly newsletter, framing it as an example of institutional failure to protect vulnerable students. They carefully avoided naming individuals, but described the pattern of a teacher using students' neurological conditions against them, while administrators looked away. The newsletter reached hundreds of families in our district. I spent 3 nights compiling the final evidence package. Screenshots, medical records, witness statements, video clips, and written testimonies filled a binder 2 inches thick. Maya helped organize everything chronologically, while her mom provided legal formatting guidance. Each piece was labeled, dated, and cross-referenced. The package represented months of careful, painstaking documentation. Parents began approaching school board members individually during pickup times and community events. These private conversations carried more weight than public complaints. Board members started hearing the same concerns from multiple sources. The pressure built quietly, but steadily, as more families recognized their children's experiences in the pattern. Miss Taylor's desperation peaked when she cornered me after school near the bike racks. She held up her phone, showing a drafted email to several college admissions offices. The subject line mentioned concerns about an applicant's character and harassment history. Her threat was clear: continue pursuing complaints, and she'd sabotage my college applications. I photographed her phone screen, then walked away without responding. The guidance counselor confirmed my fears during our next meeting. Miss Taylor served on the district's recommendation committee for competitive colleges. Her influence could affect not just my applications, but those of any student who'd supported me. The stakes had escalated beyond simple justice to my entire future. Some allies began wavering. Parents who'd been vocal started having second thoughts when they realized their own children's college prospects might be affected. Maya's parents discussed pulling her from the advocacy efforts. The support network that had seemed so strong began showing cracks. Fear of retaliation was winning over the desire for justice. Mom suggested we consider dropping the whole matter during dinner one night. She pushed food around her plate, explaining how we couldn't afford to jeopardize my college opportunities. The exhaustion in her voice revealed how much the fight had cost her, too. I found myself increasingly isolated, as even my strongest supporters urged compromise. I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. Accept Miss Taylor's silencing and protect my future? Or risk everything to prevent her from hurting more students? The choice felt truly impossible. By morning, I'd made my decision. I contacted the disability rights lawyer the advocacy group had recommended. Knowing this meant war. The regularly scheduled school board meeting arrived on a Thursday evening. What should have been routine public comments transformed into an impromptu hearing about Miss Taylor. Parents filled every seat, while others stood along the walls. Miss Taylor arrived with her union representative, her expression carefully neutral. The tension in the room felt electric. Miss Taylor presented herself as an innovative educator being persecuted by a troubled student who couldn't accept help. She spoke eloquently about her years of service and high test scores. Her union rep distributed copies of her teaching awards and positive evaluations. Several parents who didn't know the full story nodded sympathetically. Then the previous victim's mother stood up. She carried a manila folder she kept sealed for years. Inside was documentation of a formal complaint filed at Miss Taylor's previous school. The complaint had been sealed as part of a settlement, but the family had retained copies. She read portions aloud. Identical patterns, same methods. Another student hospitalized. During the meeting, phones throughout the room began buzzing. Miss Taylor's daughter had posted an emotional TikTok about growing up with a mother who took pride in breaking students. The video showed Brittany in tears, apologizing to all the students her mother had hurt. She described dinner conversations where her mother bragged about making weak students prove their disabilities were real. The board president called for order as the room erupted in shocked murmurs. I stood when recognized, my prepared statement completely forgotten. Instead, I made a different request. Rather than demanding Miss Taylor's termination, I asked the board to investigate all disability accommodation failures in the district. This wasn't about punishing one teacher, but fixing a systemic issue that enabled abuse. The board voted after hours of testimony. Miss Taylor would be immediately suspended pending a full investigation. New disability accommodation policies would be implemented district-wide. Mandatory training for all staff on recognizing and preventing disability-based discrimination. Miss Taylor was escorted from the building by security. As the vote concluded, Miss Taylor attempted one last manipulation, tearfully claiming I'd ruined her career and destroyed her family. The performance might have worked months ago, but when her own daughter stood up and contradicted her, describing years of watching her mother target vulnerable students, even Miss Taylor's remaining supporters fell silent. The victory felt hollow as I sat in the parking lot afterward, exhaustion weighing down every muscle. Months of hypervigilance and documentation had taken their toll. Mom found me there an hour later, still sitting in the car, too drained to drive home. The fight was won, but the cost was evident in my shaking hands and hollow eyes. Miss Taylor sent one final text before I blocked her number. "You were stronger than I calculated." I filed for a restraining order the next day, ensuring she couldn't contact me or come near school property. The legal protection felt like closing a chapter that had consumed my life. The school implemented real changes over the following weeks. A new disability advocate position was created. Anonymous reporting systems were established. Teachers underwent mandatory training about accommodation requirements. I became an unofficial consultant, helping identify gaps in the system. The hallways felt safer, though the memories lingered. The guidance counselor assured me that the incident wouldn't affect my college recommendations. The advocacy group offered to support my applications with documentation of my leadership and creating positive change. My fight against Miss Taylor had become an asset, showing resilience and advocacy skills. It was a brutal fight, but it taught me so much about standing up for yourself, even when the odds feel impossible. Have you ever faced someone like Miss Taylor, who tried to twist your weaknesses against you? Tell me your story in the comments below, or just let me know what you think about mine.